The truth behind Thanksgiving, gratitude or deception. Welcome, family, and thank you for joining me today on this eye-opening lesson on Thanksgiving. Before we begin, I like to say a big thank you to all who have shared the video lessons and subscribed to this ministry. Thank you and a very warm welcome. Let us begin. Thanksgiving is often portrayed as a time of joy, gratitude, and unity. A table surrounded by family, abundance, and peace. But beneath that picture lies a truth that has been deliberately buried. This is not to destroy the idea of giving thanks, but to separate truth from tradition and to challenge believers to give thanks in spirit and truth, not in ignorance. But few stop to ask, what are we really giving thanks for? This day, wrapped in comfort and celebration, hides a truth soaked in blood, betrayal, and sorrow in broken promises. A story rewritten to silence the voices of the first peoples of this land. Today, we go beyond the smiles and the feasts to uncover the truth behind Thanksgiving. A truth that challenges comfort, confronts deception, and calls us to give thanks in spirit and in truth. Today, we strip away the myths and expose the truth, because true Thanksgiving is not about feasting. It's about truth. And truth cannot be buried under tradition. We must separate truth from tradition. As believers, our gratitude must not rest upon falsehoods created by men, but on the truth revealed by the Most High Yah, because true Thanksgiving does not glorify oppression. It glorifies Yah. If we were to describe this time in history, it would be impossible to do so without speaking of ignorance and deception. The world is covered in darkness, and the only way to endure these times is by walking in the power that our Messiah, Yahawashi, provides us. The world has tried to give us a label, calling us Christians, but true believers in Yahawashi the Messiah have always been something different. We are the set-apart ones. We are those called out from the ways of this world, people who live not for popularity, but for purpose. Our lives revolve around Yahawah, His will, His ways, His desires. We are not here to blend in, but to stand out, to shine as light in the midst of deception. Let us look at the historical reality about Thanksgiving. The first so-called Thanksgiving between the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag people in 1621 has been romanticized. In truth, it marked the beginning of centuries of betrayal, bloodshed, and displacement. We must ask ourselves, have we been giving thanks for a falsehood? Have we confused worldly customs with righteous gratitude? As believers in Yahawashi the Messiah, who himself was a child of Israel, we have been called to set ourselves and our families apart from the world. This calling is not optional. It is a command. We are to demonstrate through our lives that we are true believers, distinct and separate from the customs, traditions, and values of this world. To walk in truth, we must first understand why we are commanded not to participate in the pagan celebrations and practices around us. We cannot separate from something we do not first understand why. That is why it is vital to know the culture and history of the Hebrew Israelites and to understand why our Elohim forbids His people from following the nations. From the beginning, Yahawah wanted Israel to be a set-apart nation, not a people who blended into the surrounding cultures, but a people who reflected His holiness, His righteousness, and His covenant truth. The prophet Jeremiah gave a clear warning from Yahawah, Jeremiah 10:2-3. Thus saith Yahawah, do not learn the way of the Gentiles. Do not be dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the Gentiles are dismayed at them, for the customs of the peoples are vain. These words are not ancient history. They are a warning for today, because the same Gentile customs, their holidays, their idols, their traditions, still exist, only now they wear new names and new disguises. We must be set apart, walking in obedience rather than imitation. But because this understanding goes against the grain of the world, people will mock it. They will call it legalism or extremism, but in truth, it is righteousness. To live set apart is to live as Yahawashi lived, holy, obedient, and unmoved by the opinions of men. And though the world may not understand it, separation is not bondage. It is freedom, freedom from deception, freedom from sin, and freedom to walk in the light of Yahawah's truth. And when we dare to challenge these falsehoods, when we speak truth or question the traditions they taught us, we are often met with hostility. We become enemies to those we love most. But Yahawashi told us this would happen. He said, "A man's foes shall be they of his own household." And that is the cost of walking in truth. To be set apart, even when it means standing alone. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, Thanksgiving Day is described as an annual national holiday in the United States and Canada, celebrating the harvest and other blessings of the past year. Most Americans have been taught to believe that their Thanksgiving is modeled after a 1621 harvest feast shared between the English colonists, known as the Pilgrims of Plymouth, and the Wampanoag people, the indigenous inhabitants of that land. This American holiday is rich in legend and symbolism. In schools across the country, children are taught a story that paints a picture of unity and gratitude, of Pilgrims and Native Americans sitting together, sharing food and thanking each other for a successful first harvest. We've all seen the same image repeated in books and classrooms: smiling Pilgrims in black hats, kind Native Americans offering corn and turkey, and peace across the table. Some stories even dramatize it with cheerful greetings. "Hello, Englishmen. I am Squanto. Perhaps we should make a treaty between our peoples." It sounds noble. It sounds peaceful. And to this day, millions believe that this is what they are celebrating. But the whole truth of that story is not quite as innocent, nor as pure as it has been presented. According to an article published by the New York Times titled "Everything You Learned About Thanksgiving is Wrong," the narrative we were taught has been largely rewritten, romanticized to hide the brutal reality that followed. The feast of 1621 did happen, but it was not a symbol of eternal peace. It was the beginning of a relationship that would soon be marked by betrayal, bloodshed, and genocide. Within years, the same indigenous people who helped the Pilgrims survive the harsh winters were enslaved, murdered, and driven from their ancestral lands. The truth is this: Thanksgiving, as it is commonly celebrated, is not a commemoration of peace, but a rewriting of history. A story sanitized to hide the suffering of an entire people. And yet, year after year, the world continues to celebrate this as a feast of gratitude, unaware that the truth has been buried under centuries of deception. This includes those who say that they are followers of Yahawashi the Messiah. But as Scripture reminds us, woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness. Isaiah 5:20, it is our duty as believers in Yahawashi the Messiah to walk in truth, not tradition of men, to uncover what has been hidden, and to give thanks in spirit and in truth, not according to the customs of the nations that surrounds us. True thanksgiving according to Scripture. Biblical thanksgiving has nothing to do with feasts or national traditions. It is an act of humble acknowledgement before the Most High, a heart posture of obedience and remembrance of His mercy. True thanksgiving is recognizing Yah's deliverance, not human conquest. Giving thanks for life, not for the oppression of others. Honoring the Creator daily, not only once a year. Scripture reflection. In everything give thanks, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus concerning you. 1 Thessalonians 5:18. Yah does not desire a table filled with food, while hearts remain filled with deception. He desires truth in the inward parts. Let us continue looking at the hidden origins of Thanksgiving. To gain a deeper understanding of Thanksgiving's true history, we must look closely at what the records actually say. According to historical accounts, and confirmed by sources such as the New York Times, the Mayflower did indeed bring the Pilgrims from England to North America in 1620. They established a colony and renamed the land Plymouth, Massachusetts. In 1621, after a successful harvest, these settlers held a 3-day feast, which was attended by members of the Wampanoag tribe. This is the event that Americans have been taught to celebrate. A peaceful, friendly meal between two peoples. But what most people do not realize is that this version of history was rewritten long after the fact. It wasn't until the 1830s that New Englanders began referring to that 1621 feast as the first Thanksgiving. They did this deliberately, choosing to paint the day as one of unity and gratitude, while ignoring the brutality that followed. It became part of the American identity, a way to sugarcoat colonization and erase the suffering that built the foundation of the nation. When we examine the real history, a darker truth emerges. The vast majority of the indigenous nations, including the Wampanoag, were later forcibly removed from their ancestral lands. Entire communities were wiped out through war, disease, and forced assimilation. One of the most horrifying turning points came in 1637, during what became known as the Pequot War. That year, English settlers and their native allies attacked a Pequot fort near Mystic, Connecticut. What followed was a massacre. Hundreds of Pequot men, women, and children were surrounded, trapped, and slaughtered, their homes set ablaze while they cried out in terror. The massacre at Mystic Fort marked the first time English colonists engaged in the wholesale slaughter of Native Americans. But it would not be the last. After that bloodshed, colonial leaders declared a day of thanksgiving, not for peace, but for victory in war. That is where the true roots of the American Thanksgiving lie. Not in friendship, not in gratitude, but in blood and conquest. When we understand this history, it becomes clear why true believers in Yahawashi must separate from the world's celebrations. Because what the world calls a day of thanks, Yah sees as a memorial of injustice. And he has called his people to come out from among them and be set apart. Do not learn the way of the Gentiles, for the customs of the peoples are vain. Jeremiah 10:2-3. May 26th, 1637. The day that changed everything. May 26th, 1637, a date that changed the course of history in the land that would later be called America. As the Puritans of Massachusetts Bay expanded further into Connecticut, they came into growing conflict with the Pequot Nation, a powerful tribe centered along the Thames River in southeastern Connecticut. By the spring of that year, tension had reached breaking point. 13 English colonists and traders were killed in clashes with the Pequots. In response, Governor John Endicott of Massachusetts Bay authorized a large military force to punish the tribe. But what followed was not justice, it was slaughter. On April the 23rd, 1637, around 200 Pequot warriors, angered by colonial aggression, launched a counterattack on a Connecticut settlement. 6 men and 3 women were killed, and 2 young girls were taken captive. Then, just before dawn on May 26, 1637, the Puritans and their native allies marched silently toward the Pequot village at Mystic. The people of the village were asleep, families, mothers, children, unaware that their world was about to end. When the attack began, chaos erupted. The settlers surrounded the village and set it ablaze. Those who tried to flee were shot or cut down. Those who remained were burned alive. When the smoke cleared, nearly 500 Pequot men, women, and children lay dead, their bodies reduced to ashes, their voices silenced forever. Captain John Mason, who led the raid, later wrote in his own words that the massacre was the work of God. But history reveals otherwise. It was the work of conquest and cruelty and wickedness, not divine justice. On June 5th, Mason led another attack near present-day Stonington, where the remaining Pequot were again defeated and massacred. And on July 28th, a third and final attack occurred near present-day Fairfield, marking the end of the Pequot War. Most of the surviving Pequots were captured and sold into slavery, shipped to the Caribbean, or forced into servitude among other tribes. A small remnant escaped, but their nation was shattered. This was the true beginning of the colonial legacy in America. Not a feast of gratitude, but a season of bloodshed. It is said that after the massacre at Mystic, the colonists declared a day of thanksgiving, not to honor peace, but to celebrate victory in war. That is the true root of the celebration we know today as Thanksgiving. And yet, the world still gathers each year around a table, giving thanks for a day that began with death. As believers in Yahawashi, we cannot ignore the truth. We are called to separate from deception and walk in light, for Yahawah does not delight in lies wrapped in tradition. Woe unto them that call evil good and good evil, that put darkness for light and light for darkness. Isaiah 5:20. This was not the beginning of gratitude. It was the beginning of genocide. And until we face that truth, we cannot give thanks in spirit and in truth. The truth they don't tell about Thanksgiving. When they tell the story of Thanksgiving, they tell it one way, a simple tale of unity and gratitude. They say the Native Americans sat down with the Pilgrims to share a peaceful meal. But what they don't tell you is that those who refused to accept colonization, those who resisted, their land was taken and were killed. They were massacred. This holiday, dressed up around a meal between two peoples giving thanks, hides a darker truth. What's not mentioned is that the ones being celebrated were colonizers, men who had no regard for life. They killed, they pillaged, and they destroyed in order to establish themselves. If their actions took place today, the world would condemn them as war criminals. Yet, centuries later, they are remembered as heroes, the very reason a nation celebrates a holiday of gratitude. How twisted can man be? We are told that the Pilgrims invited the Wampanoag people to feast with them in thanks for their help with the harvest. But even this detail is uncertain. The English written records do not mention an invitation, and the Wampanoag oral tradition does not trace back to this specific event. What is known is that this gathering was a rare cross-cultural moment, involving food, games, and prayer. And that prayer aspect is what we must focus on. The real origin of Thanksgiving. These Pilgrims, the early New England colonists, were accustomed to holding what they called days of Thanksgiving. But these were not family feasts. They were days of prayer, thanking their God for specific events such as military victories or the end of droughts. It was not about gratitude in general, but about offering praise for success. Often success gained through bloodshed. That is why the day was called Thanksgiving. Not because they were giving thanks for peace, but because they were thanking their God for victory and provision. And here lies the problem. What we know as Thanksgiving today is not rooted in Yah's commandments, nor in Hebrew culture. It is a tradition of man, one that came out of the Church of England, a system already steeped in compromise and corruption. Believers today must understand that much of what has been handed down as faith has been tainted, first by the Roman Catholic Church and later by the Church of England. Both built religious traditions that looked holy but were far removed from the word of Yah. The Church of England connection. In the English tradition, days of thanksgiving and special religious services became common during the English Reformation under the reign of King Henry VIII. Before 1536, there were countless church holidays, more than 50 each year, when people were required to attend church and abstain from work. But through reforms in 1537, that number was reduced to 27. The Puritans and the Anglican Church sought to eliminate nearly all church holidays except the weekly Lord's Day, which they falsely claimed was the Sabbath, and two main feasts, Christmas and Easter. So while they claimed to remove false holidays, they actually preserved the most pagan of all, Sunday worship, Christmas, and Easter, all of which trace their roots to ancient sun worship, not to the commandments of Yah. This is the foundation of what became the church system in America, a system built upon misunderstanding, mixture, and man-made tradition. Thanksgiving, therefore, did not begin as a biblical act of worship. It began as a religious ritual within the Church of England, a day where men thanked their God for blessings such as victory in war or relief from hardship. It was not Yahawah they were honoring, but the traditions of their own making, and that tradition continues today, a day celebrated across nations, claiming to thank God, but built upon bloodshed and deception. So when you give thanks, make sure it is to the Most High Yahawah, not to the gods of tradition, because true thanksgiving does not begin with wickedness of conquest or comfort. It begins with truth and obedience. In vain do they worship me, teaching for doctrines the commandments of men. Matthew 15:9. Thanksgiving around the world. The same spirit, different names. Many nations across the world celebrate their own version of Thanksgiving Day. It might look different from country to country, but the spirit behind it remains the same. In Australia, Thanksgiving is celebrated on the last Wednesday of November. In Brazil, it takes place on the fourth Thursday of November, the same day as in the United States. This date is kept mainly by families of American origin and some Protestant Christian denominations. In Germany, there is the Erntedankfest, the Harvest Thanksgiving Festival. It is a popular Christian tradition observed on the first Sunday of October. Churches are decorated with autumn crops, fruit and grain, giving the appearance of gratitude and devotion. But beneath the surface, it remains what it has always been, a harvest festival rooted in ancient tradition, not in scripture. In Japan, there is also a National Thanksgiving Day, held every year on November 23rd. This holiday was established during the American occupation after World War II, described as a day to give thanks for labor, production, and one another. But its deeper roots go far back into ancient Shinto harvest ceremonies where thanks were given to spirits and deities for the crops of the earth. And in the United Kingdom, there is the Harvest Festival of Thanksgiving. It does not have an official date, but it is traditionally held near the harvest moon closest to the autumnal equinox. Churches across Britain still celebrate it, decorating altars with fruit, vegetables, and wheat, echoing rituals that existed long before Christianity. Across every continent, in every nation, these harvest festivals have one thing in common. They are not secular days of family and food. They are religious days. Days that have been observed for millennia to thank the gods of harvest for their provision. And this is the truth most people never stop to consider. The modern idea of Thanksgiving, whether in America, Germany, Japan, or Britain, does not trace back to the Pilgrims of Plymouth. It traces back to pagan harvest worship, where nations offered thanks to false gods for rain, crops, and fertility. Even in the United Kingdom, the Harvest Festival of Thanksgiving has pre-Christian roots. Long before the Church of England, long before Christianity spread through Europe, the people of those lands were already gathering to give thanks to their gods of the earth and sky. And this is why true believers must separate from these traditions, because though they have been repackaged and disguised in Christian language, they are not of Yahawah. They are the same old practices of the nations that Yah warned his people not to imitate. Thus saith Yahawah, learn not the way of the Gentiles, for the customs of the peoples are vain. Jeremiah 10:2-3. Thanksgiving may appear innocent, but its roots reach deep into ancient soil, the soil of idol worship, the soil of deception, and Yah's people have been called to come out of it. The pagan roots of thanksgiving. Before Christianity ever came to England, the pagan Saxons already had their own harvest celebrations. At the end of the harvest season, they would offer the first sheaf of barley, oats, or wheat to their fertility gods. When the crops were safely gathered, entire communities would come together for a harvest supper, giving thanks to their deities for the fruit of the land. When Christianity arrived in Britain, those same pagan customs did not disappear. They were simply wrapped in new language. The name of the gods changed, but the rituals stayed the same. The festivals that were once dedicated to false gods were now performed in the name of the Christian God, and this pattern has continued even up until today. This is exactly what happens when people celebrate Thanksgiving today. What they are really participating in is not a biblical feast, but a continuation of harvest thanksgiving, a tradition that predates Christianity itself. In ancient Rome, the pagans also celebrated their own Thanksgiving in early October. It was dedicated to Ceres, the goddess of grain and the harvest. The festival was called Cerealia, one of Rome's most important celebrations, held to honor the so-called green goddess for the fertility of the earth. And if you trace these practices even further back, you find that the Roman celebration of Ceres was not original at all. It was borrowed from Babylon, where the people worshipped Ishtar, the goddess of fertility, vegetation, and the seasons. She was believed to control the cycles of growth and renewal, the same attributes later given to Ceres, Demeter, and other fertility goddesses throughout history. So what we see today as Thanksgiving, and what the world presents as a simple day of gratitude, is in truth a pagan harvest festival that has been secularized, repackaged, and disguised to make it appear harmless and family-centered. But beneath the decorations, the food, and the words of thanks, the spirit of the day remains unchanged. It is still rooted in pagan worship, not in obedience to Yahawah. The deception is subtle. It makes you feel that you are simply spending time with loved ones, sharing food and showing gratitude. But spiritually, you are engaging in a tradition that was never established by the Most High and is an abomination to Him. Over time, people have become accustomed to these customs, attached to the ways of the world, and desensitized to their origins. But Yahawah never told His people to honor the gods of the nations or to take part in their feasts. Thus saith Yahawah, learn not the way of the heathen, for the customs of the peoples are vain. Jeremiah 10:2-3. So when the world gathers around a table of false thanksgiving, the set-apart ones must stand apart, giving thanks only to Yahawah in truth and in righteousness, not in imitation of the nations. A call to righteous awareness. Set apart in our thanksgiving. We must be intentional about how we celebrate and how we give thanks to Yahawah. This holiday that the world calls Thanksgiving is not about the Most High, even if you say His name while keeping it. Because when we choose to celebrate this day, we are not honoring Yahawah. We are mixing the traditions of man with the commands of the Most High. We are blending the Bible with paganism and convincing ourselves that it's pure because we say we're giving thanks to Yah. But this day was never about Him, and I'll show you why. If this holiday were truly about Yahawah, then we would be keeping His festivals, the ones He commanded in His word. We would follow the pattern laid out in the Torah, not the traditions created by man. But that's not what religion teaches. That's not what these churches teach their congregation. They do not teach us Yahawah's truth or His desires. Instead, they teach us how to blend the holy practices with the unholy. and how to worship Yah in the same way that the world worships its false gods. This is the influence of Eurocentric Christianity, a religion that replaced obedience with adaptation and the commandments of Yah with the customs of men. But Yahawah has already given us his own feast days. His appointed times are holy. They do not need to be replaced or redefined. If we were truly serving him, we would not need to wander into the world's demonic festivals, trying to decide what is acceptable and what is not. His word already gives us everything we need to know. The Torah teaches us exactly how to honor him, if only we would return to it. The Feasts of Yahawah. In the Torah, Yahawah established 3 harvest feasts, his appointed times for thanksgiving and rejoicing. The barley harvest, known as the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which begins on the first full moon following the spring equinox. The wheat harvest, known as Shavuot or Pentecost, celebrated 50 days after the Feast of First Fruits. The final harvest, known as Sukkot or the Feast of Tabernacles, held on the 15th day of the 7th month, a feast of joy and abundance. And in Deuteronomy 16:15, Yahawah commands, 7 days you shall keep a sacred feast to Yahawah your Elohim in the place which he chooses, because Yahawah your Elohim will bless you in all your produce and in all the work of your hands, so that you surely rejoice. That, right there, is a true feast of thanksgiving. 7 days of joy, gratitude, and worship, a feast commanded by Yah himself. But the Christian nations have not made this part of their culture. Instead, they have chosen to embrace the cultures of the pagans, celebrating their festivals before even considering what Yah's word commands. As Hebrew Israelites, the true children of Israel, we already have our own instructions, our own appointed times, and our own covenant ways. But for too long, we have been sold the customs of the nations, cultures that lead us away from Yah, not toward him. We have been conditioned to forsake the commandments of our Elohim and to celebrate the feasts of those who hate him. It is time to come out from among them. It is time to set ourselves apart. Because as we choose to walk in Yahawah's kingdom, we must separate from the world and its ways. We must cast off every pagan tradition, every false festival, and every compromise, and return to the holy instructions given by our Father. So when the world gathers for its thanksgiving, let us gather differently. Let us give thanks according to the Torah, not tradition. Let us honor the Creator, not the customs of the nations. Because true thanksgiving is not found in the world's feasts. It is found in obedience to Yahawah's word. Wherefore, come out from among them, and be ye separate, saith Yahawah, and touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. 2 Corinthians 6:17. It is time to break away from traditions that glorify colonization and suffering. Gratitude should never be built upon lies. Let us instead teach our children the truth, to give thanks for Yah's provision, justice, and truth, not for the myths of men. The final call: choose whom you will serve. Now, let me say this clearly, because it's important. This message is not about forcing anyone to live as Hebrews, especially if that is not your culture. But if you serve the Most High Yahawah, there is one standard that applies to all. He commands that we put no other gods before him, and that we do not worship the gods of the nations. As Satan works to deceive the whole world into false worship, we must be certain that we are not unknowingly aligned with his deception. Because when we follow the traditions of men, we are no longer walking in the truth of Yah. You must ask yourself a serious question: why are you more aligned with the ways of this world than with the ways of Yahawah? He has already given us his own feasts, his appointed times. Days of true thanksgiving, worship, and holiness. But too many have traded those for man-made holidays that were never commanded by him. We cannot ignore the truth that has now been revealed. The choice is yours. Will you continue to follow the traditions of men, or will you obey the voice of Elohim? Because any other choice, after hearing this truth, is rebellion. It is wickedness in the sight of Yahawah. I have spoken the truth. Your blood is not on my hands. You have been told. Many religions celebrate and thank their gods on this day. But ask yourself this: do you truly believe that Yahawah receives glory in these pagan celebrations when his people partake in the feasts of the world? Can the Most High be honored through a tradition built on deception, death, and idolatry? You must take that question to prayer, and let Yah reveal the answer to your spirit. Addressing common excuses. Now, I know what some will say. They'll say, I don't honor Thanksgiving as a holy day. To me, it's just a day of giving thanks for what God has provided. But that is the same defense people use for Christmas and Easter. And while that may sound reasonable, the question remains: where did this day come from? Did you create it? Did Yahawah command it? Did the Torah instruct us to keep it? The answer is a resounding no. You did not create it, you inherited it. You did not receive it from Yahawah. You received it from tradition, and no matter how you try to redefine it, it still belongs to the tradition of men. You have been guided into it by habit and by culture, not by the Spirit of Yah. And the truth is, we have become comfortable with it. It's easier to go along with the world than to stand apart from it. It's easier to ignore conviction than to change. But Yahawah has not called us to comfort. He has called us to holiness. He has called us to be set apart. Because this is not just a holiday. It is a religious day with a religious spirit behind it, a spirit that has deceived the nations for generations. The truth must be spoken, so that every man and woman has the chance to come out of the false doctrines and the deceptions that this world has taught us for far too long. When we walk in truth, our thanksgiving becomes pure, and our worship becomes acceptable before Him. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. John 8:32. Choose this day whom ye will serve. Joshua 24:15. As for me and my house, we choose to follow the ways of Yahawah. We are setting ourselves apart from the ways and mindsets of this world. We are answering the call to be separate, come out from among them, and to live according to the truth of His word. I will not worship or celebrate Yahawah the same way. The rest of the world celebrates their gods. And make no mistake, there are many gods. That's why the world loves using that title, God, because it's vague. It makes you assume they are referring to the same God that you serve. We serve the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the one true living Yahawah. And He commands that we worship Him in spirit and in truth, not according to the traditions of men. These are the days to redeem, to come out from deception, to return to holiness, and to stand boldly in the truth. So I say to you, brothers and sisters, stand firm. Fight the good fight of faith. Do not let the influence of Satan and his doctrines pull you away from righteousness. Be strong. Be faithful. Be the set-apart, peculiar people that Yahawah has called you to be. Because in the end, the truth will always separate the wheat from the tares, the obedient from the disobedient, and the set apart from the deceived. Choose truth. Choose obedience. Choose Yahawah. As for me and my house, we will serve Yahawah. Joshua 24:15. Feast on Torah. Do not be afraid to stand apart from the world. True believers give thanks every day, not because of a date on the calendar, but because Yah's mercy is renewed every morning. Let your thanksgiving be born out of obedience, not tradition or a nation's myths, but out of truth, not illusion. Give thanks not for, but for the Most High's unchanging love. The world may call this a day of joy, but for many, It is a day of remembrance, a day of mourning for those who lost their land, their lives, and their voices. But let this truth awaken something within us, not bitterness, but righteousness. Because Yah calls his people to give thanks not for lies, but for his mercy, his justice, and his truth. As it is written in 1 Thessalonians 5:18, "In everything give thanks, for this is the will of Elohim in Yahawashi HaMashiach concerning you." May our gratitude be real, our hearts pure, and our eyes open. Only then can we say we have truly given thanks. If this lesson blessed you, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so that others may come to know the truth. Until next time. Shalom.